The sky was cobalt, cold. In the half-light before dawn, the flat Russian steppe stretched for miles under the frail arch of the horizon. It was a place of hard men and harder machines. War had been here for years. Even still, there was a hush at sunrise, a frozen moment before duty clawed everyone back into the business of killing. Near a ragged airstrip dotted with half-buried aircraft, a Luftwaffe pilot, his face just emerging from boyhood, tightened his gloves and stared at the contrails already slashing the east. Hundreds of men had launched into these skies. Many would not return. Erich Hartmann, just 21, shrugged on his battered jacket, climbed into the cramped cockpit of his Bf-109, and checked his instruments methodically. Over 1,000 men in the Soviet Air Force had learned his name. Most learned it too late. Erich Bubi Hartmann, the Blond Knight of Germany, was about to take flight. Again. Erich was born in 1922, into a world still reeling from the ashes of the Great War. His earliest memories were ones of movement. Post-war Germany gave way to a childhood in China, where his father worked as a physician and his mother, Elizabeth, became one of the nation's first licensed female pilots. She was a woman of steel nerves and gentle hands, Erich's guiding star. Watching her lift herself into the sky on the wind, it seemed to him the most natural thing in the universe. By 15, the boy who would become history's greatest fighter ace was already a glider instructor, teaching classmates the subtle magic of riding thermals and reading the invisible architecture of the wind. Flying for Bubi was not war. It was peace, precision, harmony, a dance with gravity and light. But peace is always brief, the first steps toward war. Returning to Germany, the Hartmanns entered a nation knotted by bitterness, hope, and the growing fever of nationalism. Erich was quiet, modest, almost bookish, always happiest alone in the sky or the woods with a battered copy of Goethe or Mörike. In flight school, Hartmann proved less a daredevil and more a scholar of the air. He recalled his mother's mantras: check your instruments, but trust your belly. Don't let your eyes believe a lie. The wind is never your enemy, only your teacher. When at 18 he joined the Luftwaffe, Erich seemed almost frail among the hard jaws of future officers. His nickname, Bubi, little boy, was half mockery, half affection. But talent cannot be hidden. He moved quickly from motorless gliders to powerful trainers. Fighting and the war were rushing toward him with terrifying certainty. Jagdgeschwader 52, the School of Legends. In 1942, Hartmann reported to Jagdgeschwader 52, JG-52, the Luftwaffe's deadliest fighter wing. Here, he came under the command of men like Gerhard Barkhorn and Günther Rahl, flinty survivors who had learned the cost of recklessness, the price paid by heroes who broke formation for glory. Erich's first missions were disasters. On October 14, 1942, Hartmann, obsessed with notching his first kill, broke formation, ignored orders, and ended up almost ramming his Bf-109 into a Soviet fighter before running out of fuel and crash landing. His punishment: 3 days of humiliating ground duty, cleaning engines and dragging heavy cables across frozen airfields. But the lesson stuck. Survive first, plan second, kill third. Never, ever get cocky. Walter Krupinski, his mentor, drummed it into him. Dogfighting is for fools. Use your head. Close and so close, the enemy's emblem fills your windscreen. Only then do you fire. Chapter 4, First Blood, Baptism over the Front. Hartmann's first confirmed kill, an Il-2 Sturmovik, came reluctantly. The Soviet flying tank was a lethal opponent. Bristling with guns, wrapped in armor, Erich emptied his entire magazine into the aircraft, nearly missing his chance as he wrestled the shaking Bf-109 through the slipstream. It was ugly, desperate, and terrifying. Still, as the burning Il-2 slumped into a snow-choked forest, Hartmann felt none of the triumph his instructors had described. There was just the shuddering echo of adrenaline and the relentless push of survival. He would have to kill again. Each moment in the sky was a negotiation with death, a new doctrine, the predator's patience. Over the winter and spring of 1943, Hartmann began to master the profound discipline of air combat. Most pilots shot from too far away, riddling the sky with desperate hope and wasted ammunition. Krupinski, blunt as always, insisted, "Don't fire until the enemy airplane is so close you can see the oil streaks on the tail." Erich took that to heart. Bubi learned to stalk, not chase. He let others dance in dogfights. He became the hawk, rising high in the morning, hunting for a moment of blind surprise. When he struck, it was precise, surgical, a short burst, a single pass, an immediate withdrawal. The Soviets began to call him the Black Devil, whose attacks came like a whisper and vanished just as swiftly. Summer 1943. The earth at Kursk trembled under the treads of thousands of tanks. But above it, in the thin blue cage, a different war raged, chaotic, lethal, and astonishingly fast. The Red Air Force and the Luftwaffe swirled in battle, hundreds of aircraft clawing at the sky from dawn to midnight. Hartmann was in it from the first day, flying 4, sometimes 6 sorties a day, exhaustion dulled by necessity and youth. In July alone, he claimed 40 Soviet aircraft, Yaks, Lags, and Lavochkins mostly, each a testament to patience and nerve. His kills were rarely the most dramatic. He picked off stragglers, caught bombers exposed, or blasted isolated escorts after letting the main formation pass. Every mission was survival's lottery. Sometimes he returned with bullet holes stitched across his wings, every warning light in the cockpit screaming. More than once, he crash-landed, never shot down in a dogfight, always felled by the debris of planes he just destroyed or by mechanical failure. Each time he made it back to base, picking shards of plexiglass from his scalp, the last thing he either remembered or wanted. The cold, the fear, the relief. Bubi becomes the Black Devil. The Soviet High Command put a price on Hartmann's head. His black tulip-nosed fighter was known, his tactics analyzed and cursed in pilots' briefings. They called him Chorny Dyavel, the Black Devil, an invisible terror who struck without warning and vanished before guns could train. But fame brought no comfort. Some nights, Erich lay awake listening to the wind batter the barracks, reading the letters home he never sent. The nature of his duty, and of his growing legend, became a heavy thing, wrapped around his neck like frost. Among aces, the Brotherhood of Survival JG-52 was filled with aces, men like Barkhorn, Krupinski, and Ral. Between missions, these young men, no older than college boys, already ancient with grief, played cards, swapped black humor, traded food parcels, and stared at the ceiling during thunderstorm nights. Each took pride in protecting new arrivals. Hartmann drilled his own rookie wingmen. Always stay close, never lose sight, attack only when you can be sure. He prized nothing as much as never losing a wingman. Even as his own tally soared, it was the safety of others, the knowledge he returned with 2 men, not 1, that became his core measure of victory. The numbers climb, and so does the price. By October 1943, Hartmann's legend outpaced his youth. He was awarded the Knight's Cross for his 148th victory, each ceremony pulling him further into the uncomfortable glare of Nazi propaganda and away from the dusty, wind-beaten reality of frontline flying. He disliked attention, hated being used to sell war bonds, and only felt at home behind the controls of his powerful, battered Bf-109. The pressure mounted. The more kills he scored, the more his enemies hunted him, the more his own command demanded, one more victory, one more heroic photograph for the press back home. In the mess halls and maintenance huts, the men of JG-52 shook their heads. Bubi, they'd joke, will score his 200th kill before he turns 22. They were almost right. The turning loss, survival, and change war took its toll. Friends vanished with brutal regularity. Groslovsky, Krupinski, Barkhorn, each was wounded, shot down, or nearly killed. Hartmann himself was forced down behind enemy lines multiple times, once spending days evading Soviet patrols through ice-hardened birch forests before finally slipping back to German lines half-frozen and delirious. He survived each time because he remembered the first rule: never fight fair, never risk the unnecessary. His kills were not the stuff of movies, always calculated, always with an exit, always with survival in mind. Kursk and after. The rhythm of kill and survive autumn and winter 1943. The front shifted constantly. Airstrips became mud pits, food grew scarce, everything burned. Erich was a machine by then, flying, eating, sleeping, flying again, tallying up victories, losing friends, dodging death by chance, and a head full of hard-won habits. There are days, countless, when he lands, steps out of his aircraft, and feels every physical sensation blend. The numbness of cold, the sting of cordite, the relief of being impossibly alive. He is now one of the highest-scoring aces in history, and he's not done yet. The engines echoed like a storm. Every morning on the Eastern Front, a fractured orchestra of Messerschmitts, Focke-Wulfs, and Sturmovic's snarled awake under gray skies. In winter, the fields froze so solid the airfields resembled slabs of iron. Summer brought dust that clung to every boot and bit of metal. War was a rhythm: fly, fight, repair, rest, fly again. There was no end in sight. Erich Hartmann unfolded the fated map, a winding, cryptic patchwork of grid squares and river lines, marking danger and survival. 1,404 missions, 825 actual aerial engagements. Each one was a coin flip between glory and oblivion. Every sortie was a memory, some seared by terror, others by numb routine. Most days, Hartmann led with silence. He barely spoke before missions. Pilots admired his calm, but could see the storm gathering behind his eyes. The black tulip, his fighter's painted nose, became a symbol across the front, both for German encouragement and Soviet fear. On free hunt missions, untethered from escort duties, Hartmann hunted alone or with a wingman. "Don't chase, don't showboat," he'd say, glancing across the cramped cockpit. Survival depended on discipline. His favorite maneuver, soaring high above, waiting until enemy planes cruised unaware below. Only when the geometry promised certainty would he attack, diving steeply, closing to within 30 meters or less, firing in a single, short burst. Every kill was confirmed by ground observers or squadron mates. The strict Luftwaffe reporting system meant each claim was scrutinized. Hartmann's statistics weren't legend because they were inflated. They stood because others could verify them. There were no easy missions. Some days he returned with shattered plexiglass, oil streaked across his flight suit, wings riddled with holes. Sometimes he crash-landed, skidding across frost-bitten earth or tangled fields. Not once was he shot down by direct enemy action. His emergency landings happened when debris from his own kills ruined an engine or sheared a propeller. On October 29, 1943, Hartmann received the Knight's Cross for 148 victories. Only months later, as his tally bore past 202, he earned the Oak Leaves. 4 months later, swords, then diamonds for 301 kills. The numbers were staggering, but each represented a narrow escape, a delicate ballet with death, and often the loss of a friend or rival. The Knight's Cross was not a badge of safety. In the cockpit, the Bf-109 was part instrument, part beast. Hartmann kept his eyes moving, never fixed ahead, always scanning for glints of sun on enemy wings, the telltale shimmer of an approaching threat. The horizon was never empty for long. Leadership arrived with rank. By February 1945, Hartmann was Gruppenkommandeur, leader of his own fighter group. Every decision meant someone else's life. He trained the next generation in his own strict doctrine: patience, logic, refusal to take foolish risks. War battered everyone. The Luftwaffe was shrinking, resources dwindling, pressure mounting. Allied bombers threatened from the west, Russian armies surged from the east. Food grew scarce, airfields crumbled, fuel was rationed. Still, every morning, Hartmann climbed into his black tulip, his face split by cold wind and inward determination. On April 17th, close to Germany's last stand, Hartmann scored his 350th victory near Crudum. The men cheered, mechanics hugged each other, wingmen scribbled frantic notes into logbooks. Victory was measured now not in triumph, but in small mercies: being alive, being together, being able to fly another day. Then came May 8, 1945, Hartmann's last combat flying. One last Soviet Yak-9 crossed his sights over Brno. Hartmann struck as he always did, quick and close. When he landed, Soviet artillery was within range of the airfield. The Luftwaffe knew the end had come. Destruction was methodical. The German crews sabotaged their own aircraft to avoid capture, torched fuel, smashed gauges. Hartmann, as leader, chose surrender to Allied forces rather than to the Soviets. History remembers his score: 352 aerial victories, most against Soviet planes, a few against American Mustangs. But for Hartmann, the real victory was survival itself. The men he led, the lessons he taught, the humility he kept even as legends surrounded him. Every battlefield marks its heroes and scars. Hartmann's were visible and invisible, etched into cockpit controls, worn into flight suits, written in every silent moment before a mission. Thus ended the war for Erich Hartmann, the highest-scoring fighter pilot in history. Yet life's greatest test was still to come. Life after Hartmann's final mission did not bring easy peace. He surrendered with his men to American forces, only to be swiftly turned over to the advancing Red Army. The war may have ended on paper, but for Erich Hartmann, a decade of darkness was only just beginning. Russian guards interrogated him for months, sometimes with questions, more often with silence and threats. He faced accusations of war crimes, absurd, trumped-up charges that he had murdered civilians, bombed bread factories, slaughtered hundreds. Hartmann refused to sign false confessions. He conducted his own defense, angering Soviet captors and prolonging his misery. The sentence: 25 years of forced labor. Hartmann was shunted between prison camps across the Soviet Union: Novocherkassk, Diaturka in the Ural Mountains, others lost to time and snow. He endured overcrowded cells, disease, meager rations, months in solitary confinement. Sometimes his persistence sparked revolt among fellow prisoners, as when they defied guards to free him from a freezing, lightless box. He never saw his young son, Erich Peter, who died at the age of 3 while Hartmann was in captivity. Hartmann wrote endless letters to his wife, Uschi, clinging to the anchor of love and the rituals of mental survival, imagining future flights, teaching English and math to other prisoners, telling stories about the sky. Letters from Uschi reached camp rarely, but every word was a lifeline. After years of struggle, the shifting tides of politics finally brought Hartmann's release. In 1955, as West Germany and the Soviet Union made uneasy concessions, Hartmann and thousands of other prisoners at last stepped into the light. He was reunited with Uschi, and for the first time met his young daughter. He had survived 10.5 years, his youth gone, but spirit unbroken. Civilian life in post-war Germany was a bewildering shock. Motorways, clothes, even language had changed. Technologies and nations once unthinkable were suddenly real, friends and enemies alike. Hartmann read every book and newspaper he could find, desperate to reclaim the knowledge and world history had denied him. But the call of the sky was too strong to ignore. In 1956, he joined the new West German Air Force, the Luftwaffe, becoming an officer and commander of West Germany's first all-jet unit, Jagdgeschwader 71 Richthofen. He trained with old and new friends, some of whom had also survived the war in captivity, including Krupinski, and Gerhard Barkhorn. He traveled to the United States, flew the F-84 and the T-33, and learned the ways of supersonic flight from American instructors. But progress carried pitfalls. When the German government adopted the Lockheed F-104 Starfighter as its main fighter, an aircraft Hartmann considered fundamentally flawed and unsafe, he made his opposition known. He campaigned for caution, urging practical tests and pilot safety. His warnings proved prescient. The Starfighter's poor record led to hundreds of crashes and the deaths of over 100 German pilots. Hartmann's outspokenness cost him his position. Unpopular with superiors, forced into early retirement in 1970, he chose integrity over ambition, just as he had in the sky. In his quiet years, Hartmann became a civilian instructor, teaching in Hangelar near Bonn, giving occasional flying lessons, and sharing stories with other veterans. He often said, "Now I like to have my rest and peace. I do not live for exhibitions." Time gentled his story. In 1997, the Russian government, seeking some measure of justice, finally exonerated Hartmann, admitting his conviction had been unlawful. He spent his last years quietly, far from the spotlight, sometimes flying aerobatics for fun or meeting future generations of pilots who wanted only to listen. Hartmann died in 1993, but his memory did not fade. On the aircraft of his old unit, decades later, the black tulip nose art, his signature from the Eastern Front, returned for a new era. His legacy is contradiction and clarity. A warrior who mastered the technique of survival, an ace who never let numbers or trophies outweigh the value of comrades. His philosophy was always clear: think first, act when certain, never risk needlessly. The score, 352 victories, the highest of all time, is only part of the story. The heart lies in discipline, in outliving disaster, in carrying burdens through war and impossible peace. Historians, aviators, and those who dream of flight still weigh Hartmann's story. The quiet boy from Weissach who became the Black Devil in Russian sky, who survived beyond the war, who never allowed hatred or fear to define him. In the end, the sky remembers Erich Hartmann, the blade, the survivor, the Blond Knight, long after the headlines and the nations have changed.